Hello everyone and welcome back. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer because we're going to unpack something that is literally happening all around you right at this very moment. We're exploring the absolutely fascinating topic of heat conduction. It's this invisible force that completely shapes how we interact with the physical world, from cooking our favorite meals all the way to how we build our homes. I love breaking down these everyday phenomena, and today we're going perfectly step by step to understand the mechanics of how heat actually travels.
To get us started, picture a really familiar scenario for a second. Have you ever noticed that when you leave a metal spoon sitting in a freshly brewed cup of hot tea, the spoon itself gets burning hot, yet if you touch a plastic handle nearby, it stays perfectly cool? It's kind of this classic kitchen mystery, right? You pull the spoon out and you can barely hold it. Why did the heat from the tea leap up into the spoon but totally ignore the plastic handle? Well, that exact physical puzzle is what we're going to solve today.
Section 1. The Hot Spoon Mystery. Why your tea accessories behave differently.
Section 2. What is heat conduction? The science of invisible heat transfer.
Okay, so that everyday occurrence of the hot spoon and the cool plastic handle isn't just some random quirk of your kitchenware. It's actually a perfect macro-level display of physics in action. But before we can fully figure out why the metal gets hot and the plastic doesn't, we have to formally define the core phenomenon. The actual definition of conduction is the transfer of heat from the hotter part of an object to the colder part, without the movement of the material as a whole. I really want to emphasize that second half. The heat itself is traveling from one end to the other, but the physical material, the actual solid structure of the spoon, stays entirely put. You don't see the metal melting or flowing into your tea, it stays completely solid, yet this invisible energy is just racing right through it.
You see, nature has this strict directional rule of physics at play. Heat always flows from a higher temperature to a lower temperature. Think back to our hot tea and the colder spoon. The tea is at a way higher temperature, so the thermal energy literally has no choice but to seek out the lower temperature environment of the metal spoon. It's basically trying to balance the scales, constantly moving from the hot source outward into the cooler surroundings.
So where does this happen? Well, conduction mainly occurs in solids, and it's especially prevalent in metals. Why is that? Because conduction requires particles to be packed really closely together. In a gas or a liquid, particles are just bouncing all over the place with tons of empty space between them. But in a solid, and especially a rigid metal, those particles are locked in super tight next to one another. That tightly packed solid structure is the absolute secret sauce to this whole process.
Section 3. The microscopic mechanism, zooming into the atomic level. Okay, let's dive into this. We've talked about the macro, everyday world of cups and spoons. Now, we're going to shrink ourselves down and look at the microscopic atomic chaos happening just beneath the surface. So the big question is, how does conduction actually work inside the metal? I mean, if the metal isn't physically melting or moving, how is this intense heat sprinting up the handle of the spoon to burn your fingers? What's the actual invisible machinery doing the work?
Here is the step-by-step chain reaction, and it's incredible. Step 1. The particles at the hot end, the part dipped in the tea, gain thermal energy and begin to vibrate rapidly. They are practically buzzing in place. Step 2. Because these particles are packed so tightly, as they vibrate, they violently collide with their neighboring particles, passing that kinetic energy along. It's exactly like a microscopic game of dominoes. But step 3 is what makes metals so special. Inside metals, there are free electrons roaming around. These zooming electrons act like little high-speed couriers. They absorb the heat and physically race through the structure, carrying the heat incredibly quickly, from the hot end all the way up to the cold end.
The end result is almost like magic. Heat travels through the rod or the spoon without the rod itself moving an inch. All of those millions of microscopic collisions, all those vibrating atoms and zooming electrons, they happen totally silently and invisibly. When you look at the spoon sitting on your table, it looks completely still. But down on the atomic level, it is a bustling, chaotic highway of transferring energy.
Section 4. Conductors versus insulators. The Great Material Divide.
Now that we get the microscopic mechanics, let's zoom back out. This atomic behavior actually dictates how we classify basically every material we use in our daily lives. It creates this ultimate battle between materials. On one side, we have good thermal conductors, which allow heat to pass through easily because their particles are perfectly arranged for that domino effect we just talked about. We're talking copper, aluminum, silver, and iron. On the flip side, we have bad thermal conductors, also known as insulators. These materials actively block or slow down heat because they lack those free electrons, and their internal structures just aren't optimized for collisions. This side includes stuff like wood, plastic, rubber, glass, and, yep, even air. These physical properties directly determine how we engineer our world. We intentionally use good conductors like aluminium or iron for cooking pots, pans, and radiators because we want the heat to travel fast and efficiently. But we use bad conductors, insulators, for things like saucepan handles, thermos flasks, and electrical wiring. And boom, there it is! We've finally solved our initial mystery. That plastic handle on your tea accessory stayed perfectly cool because plastic is a brilliant insulator. It naturally stops that chain reaction of vibrating particles dead in its tracks.
Section 5. Why Conduction Matters, Engineering Our Everyday World.
It's one thing to know how the atoms vibrate, but it's another entirely to realize why understanding this invisible process is so absolutely vital for our daily lives. Let's do a really quick rapid-fire review to lock this all in. First, conduction transfers heat without any material movement. Second, it is entirely driven by those colliding vibrating particles and fast-moving free electrons. Third, good conductors like metals transfer heat super quickly. Fourth, bad conductors, or insulators, slow that heat transfer way down. And finally, this simple concept is used heavily in cooking, heating systems, and major engineering projects all over the world.
Here's your big real-world takeaway. Understanding heat conduction is what helps us choose the exact right materials for our cooking utensils, our buildings, and our everyday appliances. Grasping this invisible microscopic science empowers us to build better, more efficient tools. It helps us design homes with proper insulation so we don't freeze in the winter, and it keeps us safe from burning our hands when we cook dinner.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. Take a quick second and just look around the room you're sitting in right now. What invisible thermal battles are happening between conductors and insulators in your own home? From the glass in your windows keeping the cold air out to the metal radiator pumping heat in, you are surrounded by this amazing science. So apply this knowledge, stay curious, and keep an eye out for the hidden physics in your everyday environment. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.